Okay, so today we're going to go ahead and be reviewing some of the band members that were a part of chapters 13 and 14. So for yesterday's homework and exit ticket, you were to listen to chapters 13 and 14 where there's going to be a lot of discussion about the band members Bud comes across. You were supposed to answer the following questions in the table, and of course be sure to write neatly and answer all questions that can definitely be found in the Bud Not Buddy book. If you don't have this book, it is also available on the Microsoft Teams page. All you would have to do to access that is go to your ELA class. In your ELA class, you would go to Files. In Files, you will go ahead and see Class Materials. You will be able to access the Bud Not Buddy book in English as well as in Spanish. Now, you boys and girls know that the audiobook can also be found in the audiobook folder, so that is all here for you to listen to and to follow along. As you can see, we're focusing on chapters 13 and 14, so you're more than welcome to pause the video now to listen to those chapters if you haven't already done so, or you can take a break and go ahead and read those chapters from the online PDF book. Or, of course, you are more than welcome to use your physical copy, which I will be doing today in this video. Okay, so as we look at question number 1, what does Bud learn about the band members? So we're going to go ahead and be having a table here where we need to write each band member's name and the instrument that they play. I also want to be sure that I add 1 or 2 additional details about the character in this box here. So we're going to go ahead and start with the first band member that is mentioned. We're going to be writing what instrument they play and maybe some textual evidence or additional details in this box. So the first band member, when we go ahead and turn to the page 153, we start to notice here that Bud is starting to learn a little bit more about the band members. First person being Jimmy. Notice how here it's mentioned that Jimmy Wesley is one of the band members. He's actually the one that is taking initiative to introduce all of the other band members to Bud. And of course, he seems to be like the leader of the band from what we read in chapter 13. Notice here that we also can see that Jimmy plays the horn. He is the horn player, so he plays a specific instrument that is a horn. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and list in this area. I'm going to put Wesley's name here. I'm going to indicate that he plays the horn, and then I'm going to go ahead and just put some additional details that I've noticed from the book while reading. For my students who are at home, possibly watching this video, please make sure you take these notes in your notebook or on a sheet of paper, as they will be going in your Wit and Wisdom binder, which is your knowledge tab, and these are important notes that will help you for the end of module. So notice how I'm just listing an additional detail in my own opinion from what I read in chapter 13, page 153. I kind of get and can make that inference that Jimmy is kind of like the leader of the band. He's the one doing most of the talking. And I am going to also point that he seems to be the leader. So if you did not write in this box, or maybe you wrote a detail that was very short, you might want to go ahead, if you have space, add it onto your homework page, or use your eraser to erase something that maybe you had that was not necessarily in the same area as this. And I'm also going to want to make sure that I list my citation. So I'm going to go ahead and list my citation. Like, where did I find this information, right? And as I was seeing in the book, where it mentions Jimmy's name and where he's kind of like talking to the other band members, I mentioned that it was actually page right here, 153. This is where it does most of the information about the band members on page 153. So I'm going to go ahead and just write that here. Page 153. And I know this is going to help me for later purposes. That's why I always want to make sure I add where am I finding this information. So next page, right? 153, I'm going to move on and see who is the next band member that Bud met here. Notice we have the drummer, Doug the Thug Tennant, and then after that we have the sax man, which is the saxophone player, known as Steady Eddie, but his, whole name is here for you. But in the book, they refer to him as Steady Eddie. So those are what I'm going to go ahead and continue adding onto my worksheet here. The band members. Let's start with Doug. And notice how right here, I'm going to go ahead and actually put these quotation marks because this is actually his nickname. They refer to Doug as the Thug, right? For some reason in the book. So we want to make sure that we add those little quotation marks because that's telling us that yes, Doug Tennant is his real physical name, but they call him the Thug as in like a nickname. And, Doug actually plays the drums. A detail about Doug, the Thug Tennant, he's actually the one that kind of is describing Herman E. Calloway as very cold-hearted and evil. So if we go back into the book, right here, 155, we're going to notice here where Bud is having a conversation with Doug, the Thug Tennant, and he's telling him how Herman E. Calloway is described as very cold-hearted and evil. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that we add that detail because this is the character who actually mentions Herman E. Calloway being very maybe mean and rude and not very friendly. So we want to make sure that we add that detail on there. We're going to say that he describes Herman E. Calloway as being what? Cold-hearted, right? Gotta put my ending quotations. And what else? Evil. Right? Put my period. Where did I find this? That was what page? Well, if I go back into the book, right there, 155. Make sure you add those details, please. Especially with the page numbers. This is the correct way to get that quality work done, along with making sure that you have the right information coming directly from the book. Next, right, we had said Harrison, Steady Eddie Patrick, and he plays a saxophone. So that's exactly who I'm moving on to next, the next band member. Harrison, Steady Eddie Patrick. He plays the saxophone. Okay, let's see here. Actually made one mistake. This was found on page 155, not 153. 155. So if you caught that before I fixed it, I'm going to be very proud of you because that means you're paying attention. And I love students who are able to catch things before I mention them. There we go. 155. Moving on. Who is this Steady Eddie and what does he do? Steady Eddie on page 157 is a character who actually tells the other band member to lay off the kid's chops. What do we think that metaphor means? Lay off the kid's chops. Let's go ahead and pause the video and think about that for a bit. And I want you to turn your book to page 157 and kind of read in this area to see if you can figure out what this piece of figurative language is trying to tell us. What do we need to interpret from that saying right there? Lay off the kid's chops. The little man's got problems enough, and he sure don't need to have you meddling with him. What do we think that means? Go ahead and pause the video now and think about that question. Steady Eddie is trying to actually defend Bud and tells Thug to lay off his chops. So he's trying to essentially, Steady Eddie's trying to defend Bud because of some teasing that's going on. So I'm going to add that detail here. Defends Bud and tells Thug, right? Thug is this character right over here. He tells him to do what? Lay off. And in the book he says the kids, right? He says the kids' chops. Lay off the kids' chops. So we actually need to change it. We're going to go ahead and use our brackets here to kind of make a short and very simple adjustment, right? Because here we see lay off the kids' chops. We don't want to say kids, right? Because we're using Bud here. So we need to make it defends Bud and tells Thug to lay off his, we're changing that word, chops. I'm going to close my quotation mark there. And I'm going to make sure I add what? Yep. In my, what are these called here? Parentheses. So if you said we need to add a citation, right, the page number, and if you said this symbol right here are parentheses, you're correct. And I got that on page 157, so that's going to be my citation, right? Right here. 157. Next, character. Chug Doo-Doo Bug Cross. It's very unique how some of these characters have very funny and silly sounding nicknames based on their actual names, right? And probably what they've gone through as band members. But notice here, right, we just finished Steady Eddie. Now we're moving to the trombone player, which is Chug Doo-Doo Bug Cross. And at the end of this video, once we finish this handout, I'll go ahead and be showing you what all of these instruments look like, just so that you can have a better idea of what instruments they play, these band members, and what they look like, so that we can get a better visual. But moving on, Chug Doo-Doo Bug Cross. So I'm going to go ahead and start here. Chug do, oops, I need to fix something really quick. There we go. Do bug. So that's actually like together, right? Chug, do bug, cross. So the man's name is actually Chug Cross, right? But they have a nickname. So do bug is his nickname. That is actually going to be the trombone player, like I mentioned. So what does Chug Bug do in the book? How is he mentioned, or what action does he take? What does he tell Bud? If you need to stop and go back into the book, you are more than welcome to do that. He does mention, though, on page 155, right here, really quickly, 155, he mentions to leave him out of your nonsense. So notice how some of the band members are talking about Harmony Calloway, and they're talking about Bud, right? And they're kind of all laughing, having a good time, messing around, right? But notice how Bug tells the band members to kind of leave him out of it. So he's not really into messing around with the nonsense. So we're going to go ahead and write that in here. That was what he basically says, right? He tells Bud, how are you doing? And then he kind of like is just to himself and tells the other band members to leave him out of their nonsense. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. He tells Doug to leave him, that word's being changed, out of his, right, that is being changed. What are these called again, these symbols? They're not parentheses, but they are brackets. If you said brackets, you're correct. And then we're going to end it with nonsense. Right? We make sure we have our period, we close our quotation marks, and then we need to have our, our citation, which is page 155. Or was it 157? Let's double check. Right? You always want to make sure you're accurate on your page numbers. Yes, it was page 155 right here where Bug says, leave me out of your nonsense. Right there. And last but not least, last band member. We had who? You tell me. Who do we have? Pause the video and go back into the book. Unless you already wrote it down, then you'll be able to answer this question. Piano player. Which is Roy, known as Dirty Deed. Breed. There we go. What about him? pretty quiet, right? He does tell Bud, like, he asks him how he's doing, but otherwise he's very quiet in the book. We don't really see him mentioning much. So we're gonna go ahead and put that he says, how you doing, right? Please excuse my dog barking in the background. Sorry about that. Right, he says how you're doing, and then we're just gonna add to Bud. But otherwise, it's pretty quiet. There we go. So these are the band members, boys and girls. Now I know some of you might be wondering, well, Miss, we're missing some, right? Who do you think we're missing here? These are who they mentioned in chapter 13 and 14. But I want you to think about this. Take a second to pause the video and answer this question to yourself. Who are we still missing that is a part of the band? If you can answer that question, right, there's two people. If you can answer that question, then I'm very proud of you because you understand that one, Harmony Calloway is a part of the band, right? And then we also have Miss Thomas, right? And Miss Thomas seems to be a mother figure in a way. She's very caring. She kind of, Bud is vulnerable to her, meaning like he feels comfortable with her. He can open up around her. He feels safe. He's cried in her lap. So if you were able to answer Harmony Calloway and Mrs. Thomas, then I'm proud of you because you do understand what's happening in the book and you are able to answer the question, right? But if you were not able to answer the question, then you do I would recommend maybe going back and listening to the audiobook, especially for chapter 13 and 14, because there's a lot of important emotion and interaction with these new characters of the book that my students need to make sure that they understand. Now, there was a last question here, and I want you to answer this. You should have answered it yesterday for homework, right, and for the exit ticket. But let's kind of review responses that we could have written here. So the question read, how do Bud's interactions with the adults in chapter 13 and 14 differ from his interactions in the beginning of the book? Differ, right? What does differ mean? Different, right? How are they different? Differ. So I'm going to just make a little note here and I'm going to put different. And I would like my students to do the same at this time. Just, make a little arrow. When we see the word differ, we want to think of how are they different? So what are we comparing here, right? We're comparing Bud's interactions. What are interactions? Think about it, right? What are interactions? Answer it to yourself. Interactions are when we come across other people or we communicate with them in some way. So Bud and his interactions and communication with other people that he had from chapter 13 and 14 are different from his interactions from the beginning of the book. Think about it. At the beginning of the book, who were the main characters? We know it was Bud, right? We know it was also Mrs. Thomas, Mr. Thomas. I'm sorry. It was Mrs. Amos, Mr. Amos, and then obviously Todd, right? Those were the adults. Those two adults in the book from the beginning of the book. Bud's interactions with those two adults was very negative. And we know why, right? There was abuse. there was disrespect going on. They shoved him in a shed. They did horrible things to him, right? Now the interactions are different from those negative effects on Bud from the beginning to the book to now, right? They're more what now? The interactions with Bud and these adults here now are what? Would you say they're still negative? Like at the beginning? Or would you say they're more positive, right? Now, these people are not just ignoring or mistreating or abusing Bud, but they're actually, taking into consideration what he's saying, who he is, where he's coming from. They actually care about his feelings and if he's eating, where he's staying, right? They care about him. So we can go ahead and write here. What can we write? How can we start this off? And I want to remind my students, if you don't have this paper, you should make sure that on a sheet of paper, you write down everything that is written in this sheet. And then, of course, you copy these notes on your own, notebook, because you're going to need them. They're going to be important. So if we're going to start off our sentence, right, we can say, capitalize that B for Bud's interactions differ from the beginning of the book to now because what? I'd like you to pause the video now and continue your sentence. I went ahead and put because people care about his safety and well-being, right? And I could have elaborated a little more. Could have said maybe because people care about his safety and well-being at this point of the book. Or I could also say because people care about his safety and well-being versus the Amoses and that mistreatment they gave him. So you can definitely add a little more to your sentence if you would like, but I'm going to go ahead and just have this sentence here. I answered the question by restating the specific instructions, right? His interactions, how were they different from the beginning to the end, and of course writing why. So this is an exemplar of what your homework should look like, boys and girls, and for whatever reason, I have extra of these worksheets. So if you need one, please go ahead and, let me know. If you're a student who's at home, then just make sure that you write these notes down on a sheet of paper so that you can use them for future references.